Picture this. It is just this blistering hot summer in London.
Oh, yeah, the hottest day of the year, actually.
Right, exactly. August 25th. And inside this incredibly elegant house in an exclusive neighborhood, famous fashion photographer Gabriel Berenson is found.
Seated right in the shadows of his living room.
Yeah, and it's a brutal scene. I mean, he is tied to a chair with wire that's just wrapped horribly tight around his wrists and ankles.
And he's been shot several times on the face.
Exactly. The wall behind him is this charred, bloody mess, and standing nearby, illuminated only by the sweeping beams of police flashlights, is his wife.
33-year-old artist Alicia Berenson.
Right. And she is wearing this ghost-like white dress that is entirely spattered with blood. And she's bleeding heavily from these really deep cuts on her wrists.
With a knife just lying right there at her feet.
Yeah, she is totally frozen, like a statue carved from ice.
Hmm.
So welcome to our deep dive.
It is such an incredibly visceral image to start with. And what happens next, or I guess rather, what doesn't happen, is what really sets the foundation for our entire discussion today.
Yeah, because today we are bringing you this ultimate masterclass level breakdown of Alex Michaelides' psychological thriller, The Silent Patient.
And our mission today isn't just to, recite a summary of a crime novel.
No, not at all. We are going to completely unpack the brilliant narrative structure and the gripping storytelling mechanics that make this book such an absolute phenomenon.
We're exploring how the author uses silence and ancient Greek mythology and the ultimate unreliable narrator to completely change how you view storytelling.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
So Alicia survives that horrific night, right?
She does, yeah.
The police rush her to the hospital, they arrest her, they question her. But she does something completely unexpected for a protagonist in a thriller.
She refuses to utter a single syllable. I mean, she never speaks another word.
It's wild. She doesn't deny the murder, but she also doesn't confess to it.
Right? Her lips simply form no words at all. She becomes utterly mute. And to really understand how the engine of this story works, you have to look at the fuel.
And the fuel here is like a deliberate manufactured absence of information, right?
Exactly. I mean, in a standard narrative, the protagonist's voice is your compass. It guides you through the plot.
Yeah, you rely on them.
Right? So by removing that voice, the author creates this massive structural void. It just forces you, the reader, to rely entirely on external interpretations of the events.
And, nature abhors a vacuum. Without her voice, everyone else just rushes in to fill that void.
Oh, absolutely they do.
Like her gallery manager, this guy named Jean-Felix Martin, actually capitalizes on this silence.
Which is so messed up when you think about it.
Right. He orchestrates an exhibition of a painting Alicia created in the days immediately following the murder while she was under house arrest.
And he puts it on display while she is literally sitting in a courtroom on trial for her life.
It's crazy. The public queues up outside the gallery, treating the exhibition like a haunted house, basically, desperately trying to read her guilt or her innocence in the brushstrokes.
Because, when someone refuses to speak, everything else they do becomes a statement. The painting itself is Alicia's only testimony.
And the imagery she chooses is just haunting. Alicia paints herself naked in her studio, standing before a blank canvas.
With her red hair falling across these really bony shoulders.
Yeah, you can see the blue veins under her translucent skin and the fresh, jagged scars on her wrists.
And she is holding a paintbrush that is dripping with red paint, though it is deliberately ambiguous whether it's paint or blood.
Right. Her mouth is open, lips parted but mute. And there are these tiny, crucial hidden details in the background that you only see if you really look closely.
Like the maggots, right?
Yes, maggots creeping on a bowl of apples and a shadowy male figure hiding in the dark background.
The most important detail, however, is the title she gives it. She paints it in the bottom left-hand corner in light blue Greek lettering, Alcestis.
Alcestis.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is why the author uses this specific Greek myth. I mean, it serves as the structural blueprint for the entire book.
Okay, so break that down for us. What is the myth of Alcestis?
So, in the ancient tragedy by Euripides, Alcestis is a queen who willingly volunteers to die in place of her cowardly husband Admetus to save him from the fates.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, she actually descends into the underworld, but she is eventually rescued by the hero Heracles and brought back to the land of the living.
Right.
But when she returns to her husband, she is completely silent.
She just refuses to speak to the man who let her die.
Exactly. The characters in the play even ask, why does she not speak? It's a profound question that echoes across thousands of years straight into this modern London psychiatric ward.
That is so clever.
Precisely. The author uses this mythological framework to signal to the astute reader that Alicia isn't just broken by trauma.
Right.
As the painting and the myth suggest, her silence is a deliberate refusal to comment. It is a mystery rooted in a profound murderous betrayal. She isn't catatonic. She is furious.
I have to say, looking at how the story is built, Alicia's silence isn't an empty room, it's a black hole.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, its gravity is just so incredibly strong that it pulls every other character's theories, their guilt, and their own obsessions right into it.
It really does.
I mean, imagine for a second that you, the listener, are trapped in a narrative where everyone else gets to write your story. They get to project their own madness onto you simply because you refuse to offer your own version of events.
That's terrifying.
Right. Her silence basically forces everyone around her to reveal who they really are.
Which brings us to the person who decides he is singularly destined to fix her. Enter our narrator, Theo Faber.
Theo is a 42-year-old forensic psychotherapist, and his interest in Alicia totally borders on obsession.
Oh, it goes way past the border.
Yeah, he manages to secure a job at the secure forensic unit where she's being held a place called The Grove, specifically to become her therapist.
But the storytelling doesn't just present Theo as a blank slate medical professional. We are plunged really deep into his own psychological wounds.
Right. The author dedicates a massive portion of the narrative to Theo's backstory.
Which is a very deliberate structural choice, by the way. We learn about his terrifying childhood in Surrey.
Yeah.
He grew up in a house dominated by this unpredictable, violently angry father.
It's so dark.
Yeah, Theo describes the visceral terror of hiding under his bed, breathing in the feathery dust, just waiting for the leather belt to whistle down on him.
There's this one haunting, fragile memory he shares that really stood out.
The snowman.
Yes. His father is away on a trip and it snows. Theo and his mother build a snowman in the garden. And unconsciously, they dress it in his father's hat and umbrella, giving it his stern, looming features.
And then they just violently pelt it with snowballs, giggling, destroying the effigy of their abuser.
Yeah, and later that night, Theo stands in the dark catching snowflakes on his fingertips, just grasping at a vanishing temporary happiness. It's heartbreaking to read.
It really is, and that trauma follows him into adulthood like a shadow. At university, the internalized abusive voice of his father drives Theo to a severe suicide attempt.
Right. He swallows packets of paracetamol alone in his cold dorm room.
And he only survives because his body violently rejects the pills. That rock bottom moment is when he discovers therapy, specifically through a therapist named Ruth, who essentially saves his life.
So for Theo, therapy doesn't just become a profession, it becomes his religion.
Exactly.
We also get an incredibly intimate look at his present-day life, right? His marriage to a beautiful actress named Kathy. He loves her with this desperate, clutching intensity.
But then one day he sees her open laptop. He discovers she is having an affair.
Yeah, the narrative takes us with him as he stalks her to a park, watching from a distance as she kisses her lover.
He is absolutely devastated, wandering around London in a total shattered daze.
So what does this all mean? Structurally, why does a psychological thriller about a silent murderer dedicate half its pages to the therapist's miserable backstory?
It is a total masterstroke in the manipulation of empathy. The author uses Theo's trauma to make him a sympathetic, deeply relatable narrator.
Makes sense.
By showing us his extreme vulnerability, his agonizing pain over his wife's infidelity, and his desperate, almost pure desire to heal Alicia, the author masterfully lowers our defenses.
We inherently trust the archetype of the wounded healer.
Right, we want this broken man to succeed in putting another broken person back together.
But looking closely at his methods, I found myself constantly questioning Theo's professional boundaries.
Oh, absolutely, they are non-existent.
Right. Is Theo actually trying to heal Alicia, or is she just a proxy for his own pain? It feels like he's trying to treat his own trauma, his own ultimate powerlessness in his marriage, by forcing this silent, captive woman to speak.
He's projecting his intense need for a cure onto her.
Exactly.
And that boundary blurring is exactly what you were supposed to feel.
Yeah.
It mimics the pacing of a detective novel, but entirely through a psychoanalytic lens.
Yeah. Theo stops acting like a licensed therapist and starts acting like a rogue private investigator.
He uses his profession as a shield to dig into the lives of everyone connected to the murder.
He is running all over London doing field work. He tracks down Max Berenson Gabriel's lawyer brother, who clearly has his own dark secrets.
Right.
He aggressively questions Jean-Felix at the gallery. He even interviews Barbie, the incredibly narcissistic neighbor.
Oh, Barbie. She claims Alicia told her she was being watched by a shadowy man in the days before the murder, right?
Yeah. Theo is hunting for clues out in the real world rather than waiting for psychological breakthroughs in the therapy room.
And this rogue behavior really escalates the tension within the Grove itself.
Mhm.
Theo's unconventional, almost reckless methods stir up the ward.
It gets really bad.
Yeah, it culminates in a deeply violent incident where a massive aggressive patient named Elif deliberately destroys Alicia's painting.
And Alicia's response is chilling. She is entirely detached, yet horrifyingly precise. She stabs Elif directly in the eye with a paintbrush.
It is a shocking moment of brutality. It reminds the reader and Theo that, regardless of how victimized she seems, Alicia is entirely capable of extreme violence.
It totally shatters the illusion of her as just a fragile victim. But the real breakthrough in Theo's investigation doesn't even happen at the clinic.
No, it happens when he takes an unauthorized trip to Cambridge to visit Alicia's remaining family.
Right. He meets her cousin Paul and her Aunt Lydia. And Aunt Lydia is so aggressively hostile, she actually spits on Theo's shoes.
This is wild. But Paul takes Theo up to the roof of their old house, and he reveals the original trauma, the actual inciting incident of Alicia's entire psychological collapse.
What happens on the roof?
So Paul explains that shortly after a horrific car crash that killed Alicia's mother, a crash, Alicia herself barely survived. Alicia and Paul were hiding on the roof.
Okay.
Down below, they overheard Alicia's father, Vernon, weeping. But he wasn't just weeping in mourning for his wife. He explicitly, loudly stated that he wished Alicia had died instead of her mother.
Oh, my God.
And Alicia heard every single word. As she later told Paul, "Dad just killed me."
Dad just killed me. That line changes the entire complexion of the story.
It really does. If we connect this to the broader psychological themes the author is weaving, this is the concept of psychic infanticide.
Psychic infanticide.
Yeah, throughout the book, the author subtly references real-world psychoanalysts to lay the groundwork for this. For instance, the theories of Alice Miller, who wrote extensively about how repressed childhood trauma and parental rejection dictate adult behavior.
So when Alicia's father rejected her existence, he essentially murdered her true self.
Exactly. He set a hidden psychological landmine deep in her psyche. This perfectly maps onto the Alcestis myth, where a woman is condemned to a physical death by the man who was supposed to protect her.
It's like the book's structure is a Trojan horse.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, we think we are reading this slick, modern medical mystery about a mute fashion world murderer, but the author sneaks this ancient, devastating tragedy about generational abuse and the destruction of a child's soul right past our defenses.
Because we are so intensely focused on the bloody crime scene with the wire and the gun, that we completely miss the invisible murder that happened decades earlier.
Exactly. And Theo, armed with this profound knowledge of her father's betrayal, finally uses it to shatter her silence.
He presents this psychological theory to her in an intense therapy session, and she finally opens up.
She gives him her secret diary.
And eventually she uses her voice to tell him the story of the night Gabriel died.
And here is where the narrative structure pulls off one of the greatest magic tricks in modern thriller history. We arrive at the ultimate structural flip.
The narrative utilizes a staggering of timelines that completely recontextualizes every single page you have read up to that point.
So Alicia finally speaks to Theo. She tells him that Barbie the neighbor was right all along.
Right, a masked intruder did break into their house. He tied them both up, he held a gun to Gabriel's head, and he pulled the trigger.
So Alicia claims she is entirely innocent of the murder.
But as Theo is listening to this confession, his internal monologue reveals something shocking to the reader. He knows she is lying.
Wait, he knows.
He knows her story about the intruder shooting Gabriel is false, and he knows she is telling him this specific lie to test him.
Because the massive narrative twist, Theo is the masked intruder.
Which is just insane. It forces you to mentally rewind the entire book.
The timelines were staggered the entire time, but disguised by the intimacy of the first-person narration.
Yes.
When we were reading about Theo discovering his wife Kathy's infidelity, feeling his pain and betrayal that wasn't happening in the present day, that happened 6 years ago.
Right. Theo stalking his wife's lover led him directly to Gabriel Berenson. Gabriel was the shadowy man sleeping with Theo's wife.
It's brilliant.
And this forces us to examine the concept of the repetition compulsion, a theory coined by Sigmund Freud, where a person repeats a traumatic event or its circumstances over and over.
Okay, so Theo didn't break into the Berenson home that hot August night intending to commit murder.
No, he broke in to expose Gabriel. He wanted Alicia to see what a fraud her husband was, just as Theo had been violently forced to see the truth about Kathy.
He wanted to inflict his own psychological shattering onto someone else.
Precisely. He ties them up, and he holds the gun, but he doesn't shoot Gabriel. Instead, he plays a horrific, calculating psychological game.
He tells Gabriel he is going to pull the trigger, but he gives Gabriel a choice. Save yourself or save your wife.
And Gabriel, the supposedly loving, perfect husband, chooses himself. He begs the intruder not to shoot him, implicitly, condemning Alicia to take the bullet in his place.
Which is the exact devastating echo of the Alcestis myth.
Gabriel becomes Admetus, the cowardly husband.
Mm-hmm.
And in that terrifying moment, Gabriel's cowardice triggers the unexploded landmine in Alicia's psyche.
The psychic infanticide committed by her father is repeated by her husband.
Yes. The two men she loved most in the world both wished her dead so they could survive.
So Theo leaves the gun on the floor and walks out into the night. And Alicia, utterly shattered, completely broken by this ultimate soul-destroying betrayal, picks up the gun and shoots Gabriel in the face 6 times.
She isn't mute out of trauma from a random home invasion. She is mute out of a profound apocalyptic rage at her husband's betrayal. And bringing us violently back to the present day, Theo now realizes that Alicia recognizes him.
She knows.
She knows her supposedly empathetic therapist is the man who broke into her house and destroyed her life 6 years ago.
So Theo, the wounded healer we've trusted this entire time, realizes he has to silence her permanently.
He sneaks into her room at the clinic and injects her with a massive lethal dose of morphine, attempting to frame it as a tragic suicide.
It is so incredibly dark when you realize the extent of the manipulation. I mean, think about this. You really have to look back at the whole narrative armed with this truth.
It changes everything.
Think about every single interaction Theo had with the other suspects. Max Jean-Felix, the shady doctors at the clinic, he wasn't investigating them to find the truth. He was investigating them to make sure they didn't know it was him.
Right. He was doing desperate damage control under the guise of therapy.
But the author doesn't let Theo get away with this final silencing, does he?
No, the structural void of Alicia's voice is filled one last time. Before the morphine takes effect, before Theo can completely erase her, Alicia leaves a final entry in her hidden diary.
She explicitly documents that Theo was the intruder and that he has just injected her.
The police find the diary, and the truth is finally spoken, even as Alicia slips away.
It completely reframes the entire audiobook experience. I mean, you almost have to immediately go back to chapter 1 and start over just to see how deftly the author hid the truth in plain sight.
You really do.
It makes you reflect on how often we blindly trust the narrator of a story just because they share their pain with us. We just accept that intimate voice in our ear as objective truth.
It's a brilliant exploitation of the first-person perspective.
Yeah.
The structure of a story can be the ultimate camouflage for the truth.
And honestly, it makes you wonder about the narrator in our own heads, too. You know, we all construct timelines and justifications that make us the hero or at least the sympathetic victim of our own stories, masking our own dark motives.
That is true. It leaves us with a chilling reality to consider regarding the very nature of psychological healing.
How so?
Well, psychotherapy is fundamentally built on an absolute sacred trust between a highly vulnerable patient and a healer. It is a dynamic of immense unequal power.
Right.
But what happens when the healer's own unexamined trauma, their own deeply repressed furies, make them more dangerous than the illness they are trying to cure? If the person holding the keys to your mind is secretly the one trying to lock you in the dark well who is guarding the guardians of our minds.
That is an incredibly haunting thought to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the architecture of the silent patient. Until next time, keep questioning the story you're being told.